Victorian Jack the Ripper. He also devoured articles in the Sun and Mirror about the Yorkshire Ripper. Like millions throughout the country, he too watched extensive coverage about the hunt for the man behind the letters and tape recording. Others were unimpressed by the publicity and voiced their doubts about the link between the tape recording and the actual serial killer. Olive Smelt, who'd survived a Ripper attack, couldn't recognise the voice.
I said all along, he's not a Geordie. The man who spoke to me was a Yorkshireman. They really believed he was a Geordie. And I said, when you meet this man, if it's him who spoke to me, you will get a shock.
Her opinion was shared by a detective inspector in Northumbria.
As soon as I received copies of the letters, I had doubts. Those doubts led to a report being submitted in September. I retained those doubts for the inquiry. Many of the officers in Northumbria were as convinced as I was that we're dealing with a hoaxer.
Detective Inspector Zachrison organised a covert check on the contents of the messages and produced a confidential report. He discovered that everything had been printed in newspapers. Certain phrases had been copied from Jack the Ripper's letters written in Victorian times and reproduced in books. His report warned that the letters and tape could be a hoax. His warnings were ignored by West Yorkshire police.
I think it's always lonely if you're outside the group. If you feel that you're swimming against the tide, and I must admit I certainly felt that, that you feel isolated.
14 months later, in 1981, Peter Sutcliffe's arrest proved Zachrison had been right. The letters and tape had been a hoax. Sutcliffe came from Bradford. He'd been questioned several times, but released because of his Yorkshire accent.
The feeling of relief was palpable. It just spread over me, and I just sat down and thought to myself, well, they've got him. And I know I was right to submit that report.
For over a year, Zachrison's warnings had been ignored. Sutcliffe told police that during that time he'd felt safe, knowing they were looking for him in the wrong place. And he confessed he'd gone on to murder 3 more women. The last victim was Jacqueline Hill, a 20-year-old North East student at Leeds University.
That man has a lot to answer for. He's obviously got quite a few deaths on his conscience for the rest of his life.
Do you believe that if he hadn't sent that tape and hadn't made those letters, Jacqueline could be alive today?
I'm sure of it. Definitely.
This case was of such a magnitude. You know, it wasn't a routine hoax that, you know, happened every day in all walks of life. This was a unique case. It does not get more serious. And I think that the public would understand and fully realise that if there was any chance of exposing and bringing to justice the person who had caused this hoax and committed this hoax, then that person should be brought to justice, because what we can't forget is that 3 people lost their lives after this tape was sent in.
With Peter Sutcliffe incarcerated for life, reviews into the Ripper case led to massive changes in the way police investigations were carried out. But the hunt for the hoaxer who diverted the manhunt was quietly forgotten. Discovering his identity was to take another 26 years. With the Yorkshire Ripper Peter Sutcliffe safely behind bars, Patrick Lavelle decided to forge a path in journalism. He put himself through college and worked his way up from weekly to daily newspapers. He got a degree in criminal justice studies while he was crime correspondent for the Northern Echo. He won awards as the region's leading investigative journalist. But his experience as a young barman listening to the hoax tape had been forgotten until he took up a new appointment.
See you later. I was appointed news editor of the Sunderland Echo in 1998. I was looking for stories, headlines. There's an anniversary coming up. of the 20th anniversary of the first letter being sent, I thought it would make a good headline, a good story, a good feature. So I put a few paragraphs in the Echo asking for people's memories, and it just escalated from there. It became apparent to me only after a few hours research that once Sutcliffe was arrested and convicted, the hoaxer was basically forgotten about. Looking into it more and then, you know, realising the magnitude of it, really, the impact it had, the possible needless, the wasted lives and the money, and it just seemed really unusual to me that it had been forgotten about in that way. Everything had gone quiet about it, and no one had actually pursued that line, that unfinished business.
Unlike Lavelle and Gregg, John Humble's life had gone badly wrong. For years he'd drifted in and out of work, drinking heavily with periodic bouts of depression. He was married for 9 years. But around the time that Patrick Lavelle embarked on his campaign and Tyne Tees made a documentary about the hoaxer, Humble's life unravelled still more, and his wife left him. He moved in with his brother in Ford Estate. Neighbours said he transported his possessions in a wheelie bin. By now, he was a confirmed alcoholic. Humble's daily routine led him to the off-licence for cheap cider, often 2 or 3 times a day. He spent most of his time in his neglected home, living in squalor with his brother and their cats.